All right, hello YouTube. It's time for another video from Random Thoughts McCrae's Mind, the worst video channel on YouTube. And today I'm going to be talking about why Bitcoin is going to zero. So I'm here in a thicket of mesquite trees, trying to get a bit of wind block, which is probably not going to work, but wind's blowing right now, so we'll see how this works out. But I'm in the mood to talk about Bitcoin, even though I haven't prepared for this at all. So we'll see how this goes. But anyway, Bitcoin is really popular today, and I'm going to talk about why Bitcoin is going to zero and why it's going to be a very terrible investment in the future. So first of all, let's talk about what Bitcoin is and what it isn't. So when Bitcoin first came out, the idea behind Bitcoin was that it was going to be a currency. It's going to be a currency to replace all currencies, and it was going to be used as currency. And so when Bitcoin first rolled out, they tried to use it at ATMs and get people to pay for stuff with Bitcoin. People were really excited about that. But once it rolled out, they realized, this is really stupid. This is not going to work at all. And so they quickly gave up on that idea. But Bitcoin was going straight up, so people still were excited about the prospects for it as a world currency, in spite of the fact that it wasn't going to be used as currency. So it became just an investment. And so the key to Bitcoin, and the reason that libertarians like Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is a libertarian fantasy. It's based on libertarian economic beliefs, and in particular, it's based on the gold standard. And so what Bitcoin is a recreation of the gold standard, which failed spectacularly and is no longer used. And that's a great source of frustration to right-wingers in particular, because they don't like government spending and they want to limit the money supply so that the power of the wealthy is maximized. And so since they are fairly wealthy themselves and identify with the wealthy, they prefer that system of organizing society. So Bitcoin is basically the gold standard, recreated. Because you can't recreate the gold standard with a government, because governments have too many limitations. With the gold standard, they can't have enough money to provide the services that a population in today's world expects from a government. And so Bitcoin is an attempt to basically overthrow the monetary system and implement the gold standard through unelected means by having a supposedly superior currency. So what Bitcoiners really fail to understand is that ultimately the gold standard did not fail because politicians just wanted to spend too much money, which is what right-wingers always think the problem is with politicians, that they just want to spend money on people who are undeserving in their mind. That's not the reason that politicians spend money, and that's the basic failure of Bitcoin. And the reason that politicians spend money on their societies is because they have to spend money on people, or there will be revolution. And revolution is a big deal. It's not a very big deal for a person who's 34 years old and is just learning about finance. And this idea of Bitcoin sounds really cool. But if you are a member of the establishment, the revolution is pretty scary, because you're going to lose everything in a revolution. You lose it all. And that's what politicians are terrified of at all times, because at all times you are at risk of revolution. There's always the beginnings of a revolution bubbling at all times, right? And so, if you just think about the power of one person, you think about Jesus Christ. One person, one insignificant person, created an entire world religion. One person. And that person may or may not even have existed, which, if that's the case, that's really something. A person who didn't even exist created a world religion. So that's the power of one person. Buddha. Think about Hitler. Hitler was a complete failure in life. He had no real abilities of any kind, except that he was a great public speaker, which he didn't even know at the time, but only a great public speaker for that particular time. That particular style of speaking was very effective at that time. It would not be effective today. He was just a man of his time. He was able to maximize his abilities and have a vision for the future. And that created a revolution in Germany. So, the problem ultimately for Bitcoin is that the public will not stand for the gold standard. And the reason we got off the gold standard in the 1970s was because of the Vietnam War. We wanted to have the war, but we were too limited by budgets with the gold standard to have a war. I mean, what are you going to do when you want to have a war and you don't have enough money and the only problem is the gold standard? You just get rid of the gold standard. Right? Problem solved. So now people think we ought to get back on the gold standard, but again, what is your choice going to be if you're an average person and you have to choose between the gold standard and Social Security, or you have to choose between the gold standard and Medicare, or you have to choose between the gold standard and war? Those are easy decisions. People are going to get off the gold standard 100% of the time. And that's why Bitcoin can never work. The other problem for Bitcoin is that money is not real, as I've discussed in my previous two videos. And Bitcoin is not real either. I mean, how is Bitcoin any different than fiat currency? I mean, somebody just decided to make a currency and put it on the internet. I mean, that's literally all Bitcoin is. And they say, well, we're only going to make a certain amount of it. Never mind the fact that it's nothing at all, not backed by anything. It's just an idea, right? It's just some guy with some computer code. And this is supposed to be a currency. And they tried it as a currency. It failed. And now, because it's been going up, because people like this idea, because there's a lot of young white guys that have a right-wing mindset, they're terrified by all the government spending that's going on right now because of the financial crisis and then the COVID crisis and all of the problems that we have to deal with in society these days. So people are really afraid of what they see as what's going to be a loss of the power of the wealthy, which is a very legitimate concern because that is probably going to happen. And there's not anything that Bitcoin's going to be able to do to stop it. You're not going to be able to impose a artificial currency on the world through Bitcoin and have any success in structuring societies, because societies are not they're going to reject your libertarian values, because libertarians have never gotten anywhere with their values, because ultimately libertarians want to start with them owning everything and nobody else having anything. And it's not a very attractive proposition for 99% of the human race. They just say, what's in it for me? And all libertarians can say is, well, there's not anything in it for you. Think about what's in it for me. Stop thinking about yourself. Think about me for a change. Libertarians always want to have all the land, all the money, right? And this is how Bitcoin works, right? You started at $2, or it didn't even start at $2. It started at 1 cent or whatever it was. Goes up to 40,000, and now we're going to make the rules. Now we're going to say Bitcoin is our currency because we've got $40,000 worth of Bitcoin, and we're going to own all the Bitcoin. And sorry for you, you should have gotten into Bitcoin early. You're screwed, and then you're just going to have to live with it. I'm sorry. That's not going to work. Not going to work under any circumstance. So, and then again, another problem, the basic problem though with Bitcoin, is that government debt and government money, again, is not real. So we've come to a point where people recognize this. All right, so people don't worry about the debt anymore. People don't worry about there not being enough money anymore because they've seen this game played already. They know how it turns out. And so people don't concern themselves with the debt because people recognize it doesn't exist, right? More and more people are recognizing that the debt is not real, and they don't care at all about the debt because it's not a concern for them. They don't have to worry about government debt. I mean, they're not going to pay the price. If there's some kind of government debt problem, that's going to be paid by the wealthy. The wealthy aren't going to pay that price, so nothing's going to be done about this so-called problem. So ultimately, the fact that you have limitless debt is a problem for Bitcoin because as long as you can just create money out of nothing and everybody can be happy with that, it's only a problem of who gets the money. That's the problem. And so in Bitcoin and in today's society, the wealthy get all of the money, right? So that can't work in any society. Not going to work ever. And so ultimately, people are going to recognize that Bitcoin has no value, that it's just a bunch of computer code by a bunch of right-wing Republicans. And at a certain point, people will panic. It will fall. It'll start falling. And it will go all the way to zero because Bitcoin has no value. You could say it has a value like gold, but we already have gold, so you don't need Bitcoin. You can have a gold ETF. Really, all that Bitcoin really is a leveraged play on the stock market. So if you believe the stock market's going to go up, you want to buy Bitcoin because it's going to go up more because it's a leveraged play. Because people have a fantastic view of Bitcoin, and that's going to mirror the basic ideas that people have about the stock market. If people are bullish on the stock market, they're going to be bullish on Bitcoin, so you're going to make more money in Bitcoin. But when the stock market starts going down, Bitcoin's going to collapse. So what you will see is if we ever have a real downturn in the stock market, kind of 50% downturn, you're going to see Bitcoin just collapse. It's going to go down. It'll go down at least 50%, probably go down more like 80%. And when it goes down to 80%, people are just going to get wiped out because people don't believe that Bitcoin can go to zero or even go down 80%, which, I mean, it will go down 80% at some point, guaranteed. Everything goes down 80% at some point in financial markets. So, and Bitcoin is a crazy type of security, or cryptos. I'm referring to Bitcoin across all cryptos. But the fact that there's so many cryptos is, again, a problem for Bitcoin, because how can you have a gold standard when you're producing all these different cryptos, right? They're all a product of fiat money. There's no fiat money, there wouldn't be all these cryptos. So how can you have a security that's based on the gold standard when the whole value of your cryptos is based on fiat money producing this massive asset inflation that's pumping up all these cryptocurrencies, right? There's not just Bitcoin. I mean, there's all these idiotic, they come up with a new one every day and everybody loves every single one of them. They all go up. That's fiat money. There's no difference. There's no difference between cryptos and fiat money. None. How can you have all of these different, one after another, and they all go up, 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 up? That's fiat money. That's a mania. That is a speculative frenzy. That is something that is going to collapse. And that's going to be the end of Bitcoin, ultimately. Because ultimately, all it is a bunch of white guys that came up with an idea based on the gold standard, which is something that's already failed. And when push comes to shove, it will collapse, and there will be nothing to stand behind it, right? The Federal Reserve is going to stand behind the stock market. The Federal Reserve is going to bail out the stock market. It's going to pump it back up. It's not going to pump Bitcoin back up. Bitcoin is a loser's game, ultimately. And ultimately, it will go to zero. Once it falls 80%, people will lose interest in it. It'll probably trade around, people are just bouncing around. People are going to like this idea of a gold standard and Bitcoin money for probably 10 years or so. It'll have some nominal value along the way. But from the heights it's at now, it's going to be way, 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 way lower in 5 to 10 years. 10 years, it'll probably be almost gone. 5 years, it'll probably be much less than it is today. But ultimately, again, it's a basic concept. Money's not real. Bitcoin's not real. And Bitcoin is ultimately a recognition that money's not real, but it's an attempt to make money real. And that's the fundamental problem for Bitcoin, is that you can't make something that's not real ever. There's no way to make money real. Money is a social arrangement. People are not going to accept Bitcoin as a currency. They're going to want the currency of their government, which is elected or put in place through some power arrangement that people like. People like their dictator, or they like their totalitarian government, or they like their elected government. Whatever it is, that's the currency that they're going to prefer, and they're not going to buy Bitcoin. So if debt's not real and money's not real, then Bitcoin can never be real. And that is why Bitcoin will ultimately go to zero. And that's all for today. My video on Bitcoin. I'm ending this video, and as you can see, I have no idea what to say right now. So I'll just end it right here. So long, YouTube. This has been another episode of Random Thoughts from McCrae's Mind, the worst video channel on YouTube. Thanks for not watching. Thanks for not subscribing. Thanks for not liking this video, and I'll see you next time. So long.